girls go tell fortunes, tell the whole truth. A portly gypsy was sitting at her usual workplace. Whether there were stalls like rusty counters like eternal garbage and dirt, this gypsy was an integral part of the small market of their area. She had her own chair with an gancha, then every day they nodded because of some bins, and at lunchtime they took it back. She rolled her dreary black eyes at the girls and beckoned with her hand. Alia and Masha jumped and passed by. Suddenly Masha stopped and let her guess. It's interesting because she wandered to the girls from the yard, and she was lying. Did I say everything I don't want, and I don't have money? I'll pay. Masha was already dragging her back by the sleeve. And how much does it cost for the two of us? How much can you give, dear? The gypsy, Masha slightly perked up, gave her 50 rubles, and the gypsy immediately hid the money in her pocket. The girl held out her hand. The gypsy took. She looked at her fingertips, at the palm of her hand, and told that Masha would most often walk in white, and that she would not rush to marry until she was 25, otherwise she would be unhappy. Alia extended her hand to the gypsy in disbelief, examining the countless trinkets on her neck swollen from the second chin. The gypsy looked at the palm Ali and suddenly recoiled, clutching her chest with her free hand. So the actress thought Alia, but nevertheless she felt anxiety frowning her forehead. The gypsy again leaned on the other girl. But so there, when Olga gets married? Masha asked impatiently and laughed lightly at Alia. The gypsy shook her head in annoyance. Don't get in the blue car, but if you sit down, you won't get up again. Alia pressed her hand to herself as if a gypsy wanted to take it away. What does it mean she would die in the blue car? The girl wanted to go home as soon as possible, and it was dreary and feelings overwhelmed, and suddenly it began to seem that the whole world was against her, and in everything it's the fault of this upstart Masha forever, that she won't be there. As if in confirmation of a surging incomprehensible fear, a heavy voice of a gypsy was heard behind her back. Hey girl, you're fair. And how old are you? 12, answered Alia. The gypsy again shook her head and clucked. And for adults all days are similar to each other. They fly by one, not much different from the previous one in childhood. But the world is full of disturbing discoveries. The nightmares in which potassium was a gypsy have long passed, supplanted by new impressions over time. Or it began to seem that fortune telling. She simply had a dream, and she completely stopped thinking about it. In blue cars, but no one to her never offered to sit down. In the neighboring village, the club music had long ceased, and the youth company still couldn't go home. Even though Alice's head was cloudy from drinking, she still thought that this time grandmother's patience would come to an end, and her disco next time for sure. They won't let the guys go. Really, let's go already. My grandmother will beat me. The most sober in their company, Dano, was given to him, and he was destined to drive the car. He looked lousy as if he was about to vomit. Green Jiguli blinked their headlights drowsily and let out a heavy sigh from the youth. Drunk in them set off. Alla, like a girl, Bones, to whom her parents gave her an old Jiguli for adulthood, sat in a place of honor in front. A narrow road between villages, meandering back and forth. A car drove along it, not sure on. A 16-year-old Dano was a so-so driver, but older guys generally barely stood on their feet. Stupid and rude jokes, loud laughter, everyone was tipsy and maneuvering. The car was perceived as a funny attraction from which sometimes it tickled in the stomach. Well, how do you like my car, that good dad? And iPad shaman asked Kostya. How is it new and catchy, with a rusty blue trough in one of the dark nooks and crannies of Alla's memory? A dim light turned on as if in a huge hall immersed in darkness. A match was lit in the far corner. What color it was? Alla blue. Alochka, frozen in soul, asked again. And what was Dano like in the films? The gearbox sharply bent down. He vomited, and with a squeal, she recoiled from him, pressing herself against the door. Dano let go of the steering wheel in a convulsion, and involuntarily pressed on the gas. The car accelerated and swerved. Everyone screamed wildly. The last thing they saw was hello. It was a tree brightly lit by the headlights right in front of her eyes, and immediately after that, a terrible screech of metal and the sound of breaking glass. Ella flew out of the windshield a bush of chrysanthemums, and countlessly multiplied in her eyes. Ella, she wanted to see them closer. She remembered it. She remembered that she was very fond of the bitterly spicy, strong smells of autumn flowers. She painfully wanted to smell them. Ella squeezed out of herself and Kadia's mother Laus I finally paid attention to her stroller to her. Daughter, what is it you want? A flower you want to smell? Ella in the answer blinked, slightly shaking her head. The woman furtively looked around, looking for the horizon. In rare passers-by, the medical staff seemed to be clear. She bent over the bush and picked one orange flower with increasing redness to the core. But here you go. She smiled into her daughter's pale, haggard face and brought the bright flower to her nose. The aroma of autumn tickled Alia's nostrils. Cockle with a rough movement, she pulled her right hand towards him, and the mother put the flower in her twisted fingers. All smiled crookedly. From her memory, a firmly forgotten day surfaced. The same autumn, she is a first grader standing with her friend near the flower bed with asters under the windows of their 5-story building, and collects flowers in a matchbox. Clumsy drummers they called insects, very similar to bees, only these were larger and absolutely harmless on the street. Or it was still scary, but still without that wild panic and horror that seized her in the first days the world fell upon her. Snow, avalanche, smells, sounds, infinity of space. Imagine that you went outside and suddenly, instead of the usual road, you found yourself on a small raft in the middle of a stormy ocean. 4 months she spent within the walls of medical institutions, one of them in a coma, and only recently they began to take her out for a walk. Today she arrived Mom. Twice a week they came with Dad in turn. For the first month she didn't recognize them, but gradually her brain began to clear up. She remembered only fragments of the past. Memories returned to her slowly and casually. Well, it's time to go to the exercises. Let's go, Mom said, and turned the stroller around. Or she wanted to cry. Hands will restore everything below the belt. Without a chance, such was the doctor's verdict. They pulled her hands on her fingers, stretched, twisted, frozen tendons. It was very painful. Ella was always chained to a wheelchair, and there are many months ahead of restoring the sight of speech and hands. But so far she has not yet had time to fully realize the full price of this fatal mistake. Her body experienced too much shock, but the realization will come. Ella to feel like a puppy thrown into a bucket of water. You need to swim, flounder to look for a way out, because it is easiest to choke. The child looked at Lou very carefully, moving his eyebrows. Beat. Ella was struck by his purity and innocence. Top, she kept saying, supporting him under her armpits and forcing him to stamp on her knees. She really wanted to make him smile, but the baby had a different opinion. He reached out his hand and firmly grabbed Ella by the hair with tenacious fingers. Oh, Yegorka don't rush to help Masha, Ella's old friend. She freed Ella's hair and took baby Igorka displeasedly for squirming. Well, since you are here, what do you do all day long? What can I do? Read. Dumplings here with Mom sculpted. Read. You couldn't stand reading, said it was a waste of time. It was 7 years ago, Masha, and then now I'm sure that what we were doing then was an empty living of time, but now you're not living the time in vain. Masha looked at the stroller. All the motionless legs of the all looked at her friend with pain. She bit her tongue until in the eyes of the majority, she is a useless cell of society, waste material. She will never understand that for Ella the meaning of life is now her value is not in achieving imaginary goals, not in accordance with the ideal dictated to them by someone. Until quite recently, Scarlett herself thought so during a long depression and despair, when the future that Ella vaguely imagined at her 16 years old, the future in which she actively had fun and needed to crash in a cruel twist of fate. At that time it seemed to her that this was the end. and there was no point in living further. Now life for Allah is just life, a measured path, a peaceful current, along which she swims with wide eyes and finds every day a small miracle. Yesterday they hatched chickens. Allah helped to get rid of the shell with a weak lump, and then when they recovered she pressed them to her face with a gentle fluff. I felt how often their hearts sank looking at her radio, and they sold the apartment and moved to a private house so that she had more opportunities for movement, and I had a complete blockage. Changed the subject. Masha, my hubby, became addicted to these very drinks. If Masha sighed heavily, all the gold what my parents bought he took out of the house, even took the chain off me in a dream. And last night he came, and again the pupils were completely black. The insane himself drove someone around the apartment. Then he began to look for an axe again. But I'm not a fool and threw it into a landfill a long time ago. Oh, soon to return to work in the clinic, to return to the village. Looked at the cars, blue circles under the eyes, and remember that the gypsy told you not to get married until the age of 25. Remember Alice, she comes out, and she didn't make a mistake about you. Masha irritably waved her hand. She would take better care of herself. I see her sometimes. There is a beggar in the market. Act seriously, she is still there. Alice's heart beat faster. Some fresh breath flashed in him, a ghostly hope. Why it is so necessary to feed your axe with something, only to beg and know how to confidently, said Masha. Listen, and I wanted to ask you everything. What did you see when you slept for a whole month? Then nothing to you, just turned off the light. Blackness. But before that I saw a boy who was with us in the car. Danila, he was driving, so I saw how he flew away. I really wanted him, but he was told that I still early, and immediately blackness came. Masha turned pale. Well, Allah did not notice this. She thought about the gypsy, and that she needed to see her again. Dad took the stroller out of the car and helped Ollie get into it. Further and further, I myself, said Allah, and rolled. The gypsy was not in that place where she saw her for the last time. There was a store. With a sinking heart, she decided to drive further. Some passers-by with curiosity saw her off, and with their eyes, I must have been a natural freak. Allah thought. Here she sits and dejectedly clicks seeds behind the counter with sweets. The gypsy became even more voluminous and looser when she caught up. Allah got scared with her and didn't stop moving on. Hey girl, come back, I'll tell fortunes, lazily shouted after her the gypsy. Allah froze, seized by strong excitement. Going with spirit, she slowly turned around and approached the fortune teller. In the face of the gypsy, nothing has changed. It seems she didn't recognize Alu. The girl gave her money. The gypsy took her. She looked at her hand and looked at it every now and then. Her forehead frowned, and then she looked sternly at the anal with dreary black eyes. I once saw this hand. She was waiting for an answer from Allah, but a lump stuck in her throat, and her eyes shone with tears. The gypsy shook her head, and then in the second, chin trembled like jelly. Why are you so, baby? The sea was knee-deep. Yes, Allah bit her lip in. It only got worse. Now she will know for sure that there is no chance. Allah was going to leave, but the gypsy was in no hurry to let go of her hand. You gave up, concluded the woman, because she gave up yes to me. They said that there is no chance. Allah murmured. A lot they know. The gypsy thought. Go to others. They are under a red roof with 4 huge eyes instead of windows where they are, but I have no money. In the fog, Allah was returning to the car. Mom would not want to call, and they were from Moscow, who had a chain of restaurants that year. She already donated a fortune for them in the village. She woke up very early. She sat on her bed in the rehabilitation center, green oak forests, and looked out the window at the dawn and the sky. She was pink, cold, clean, and surprisingly young. Now if only she could walk barefoot in the morning dew, to feel the pleasant coolness and freshness with her heels. She imagined how her toes would move from this. She would feel each of them, would feel feels. Alice surprised to look at her feet, because it seemed to her that she did it or just appeared. She strained all her strength and, in disbelief, saw how the 3 middle fingers moved slightly on her leg. Dear listener, if you like this story, subscribe to our channel, put like and write your comment. Before meetings in the next story.